Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Search Engine Journal webinar. Today, we're going to be joined by Dan Dillon, Vice President of Marketing at Reveal Mobile, who's going to be talking about location data and utilizing location data to really win market share and outsmart your competitors, which I think is something, as I mentioned to Dan, we were kind of getting into the precursor of running through some of these. I think it's one of those things that everybody knows we should be doing, and we just don't really do as well as we should. So I think this is a really great presentation. I think you're going to really enjoy it. My name's Brent Torres. I'll be moderating today. Dan, you want to take a moment and just tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into some housekeeping points?
Yeah, sure, Brent. Thank you. I'd be happy to. Great to be with you all today. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak about location-based marketing. Just a couple of words, as Brent mentioned, by way of introduction. My background is in all things digital marketing, frankly, and I've been at Reveal Mobile here for about 6 months, started as the VP back in the summer. And at Reveal, I look after all things digital, as I mentioned, and then we also build pipeline for the sales team every day. With an awesome team of marketers, we look after what you see here: demand generation, content marketing, product marketing, branding, just about every other aspect of the marketing mix that you can name. Before Reveal, I led marketing teams and have worn, frankly, many hats over the years at both large and small software companies, including Cerner, which is a healthcare company out in the Midwest, Perceptive Software, which no longer exists anymore as a result of acquisition, and Lexmark. So everything from direct-to-consumer companies to large B2B enterprise software companies. And it's a pleasure to be able to spend an hour with you guys today, as I mentioned, to talk about location-based marketing.
Beautiful. So diving into a couple housekeeping points for everybody. If during the webinar at any point you have any questions, comments, or something you'd like to mention, there is a question box at the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen where you can input questions. There will be a few poll questions throughout the presentation. That'll be an opportunity for you to provide some of your feedback. So we do ask if you just take a moment and participate in the polls. It really helps a lot for the presentation. There will be a Q&A. As you're entering those questions into that question box, Christy will be gathering them for me to ask during the Q&A. So we will be paying attention to that. We will have that at the end of the presentation. So please ask all of your questions. We'll do our best throughout the webinar to drop any resources mentioned. If we mention a tool, we mention an article, we're going to do our best to drop those links into the GoToWebinar chat. But if we miss something, by all means, just let us know. And after the webinar, I would ask, we do have just a small survey. It literally only takes about 5 minutes, but that survey really does help both us and our speakers and presenters to better improve upon webinars in general going forward. So do please take a moment at the very end to just give us a couple minutes of your time for that survey. Lastly, the entire presentation will be recorded and will be made available through a recap post early next week. So please check for that in case you want to share it, watch again, or anything else. And without any further delay, Dan, go ahead and take off.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. Appreciate it. So if you think for just a minute about the wide range of marketing strategies, tactics, and technologies, it gets pretty dizzying pretty fast. It's a great time to be a marketer. We all know that. But it's also one of the hardest times to be a marketer. The pressure is on us every day to deliver pipeline and revenue. So there's also pressure, as you would guess, to choose the best methods for driving sales, for driving activation. And the data here, I want to set the context here with some data points. The data here shows just how effective location-based marketing is at doing those things: building pipeline, activating customers, et cetera. So Merkle, here at the bottom of your slide, says that just more than about 60% of marketers use location data to create a more personalized experience for consumers. And we know, even right down to Generation Z, those consumers who are entering the job market and having disposable income for the first time, value personalization as much as any other demo. So a fairly compelling data point from Merkle. Mobile Marketer tells us that nearly 90% of all of us on today's call use location data in campaigns. So I'm not going to be teaching you anything that you don't know on this slide, certainly, but I do hope over the course of the webinar to share some insights that you didn't know before. And now lastly, eMarketer is telling us that we're increasing our investment in location-based advertising at a rate of 40% year over year. So this makes location-based marketing one of the fastest growing marketing tactics for consumer and retail segments. So the net of this is location data and location-based marketing have definitely come into their own. We know a good thing when we see one as marketers, and location data is that gift that keeps on giving. So I just want to set the stage here with some key terms and provide some useful context into location-based marketing that will set the stage for the rest of the webinar today. Now, a lot of you on the phone on the webinar today are already doing this, and you may be familiar with these terms. But if you're not, it's certainly something you should be doing based on the data we just saw. So to start here at the top of the slide, geofencing is actually one of the most searched keywords by digital marketers like us looking to do location-based marketing. And it really involves creating a virtual barrier around a physical location. This can either be a radius around a large location, that's that blue dot you see on Google Maps or on some other mapping app on your phone. When that blue dot is very large, that your location is inexact. The smaller the blue circle around your dot, the more precise your location is. Now, to get precise, we start talking about polygons. And a polygon is effectively a line or a set of lines around a specific building or store footprint. And you can see an example of this here on the slide around a Publix grocery store. So you can see how this level of accuracy with polygons enables you to run a very different kind of geo-targeting campaign from the targeting you can do on, say, Google Ads or Facebook. And we'll talk more about that actually when we talk through a few case studies towards the end of the session. Now, geofencing also refers to advertising when someone enters that virtual barrier. So a targeted audience member at Publix, as an example, might receive an alert or a push notification or an ad or a coupon within the app based on them being at the store. And geofencing is actually the most prevalent tactic in location-based marketing, with nearly 50% of all of us using geofencing in LBM. And now geo-targeting is a little bit of a different term, and that refers to delivering ads to people who have visited a specific location at some point in the past. So this might involve serving ads for, let's say, organic groceries to people who have recently been to a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's or a Sprouts or even all of those stores put together. And then lastly, geo-conquesting on the bottom of the slide there refers to advertising to people who were previously in a competitor's location with the intention of winning them away from that competitor. So an example of this might be, let's say Chick-fil-A wants to advertise a new chicken sandwich, and they want to win over everyone who's been to a KFC, a Popeyes, and a Wendy's. So they're going to build that audience based on those people who visited the locations and serve ads to those individuals without serving them to people who've been to Chick-fil-A, let's say. And now geo-conquesting is by far one of the most valuable and underutilized methods of location-based marketing, and something I encourage everyone on the call today to try with your campaigns if you're not doing that today. So let's zoom in the lens a little bit further and talk about those segments that are best fits for location-based marketing. And there's really sort of three categories that are the best fit. This is not an exhaustive list by any stretch, but it's certainly directional in terms of the kind of organization that is really a rock-solid match for location-based marketing. And the first category is made up of organizations that have multiple retail locations. So think of chain stores, think of franchises, retailers with multiple locations, of course. Perfect candidates. Auto dealerships. So oftentimes in a region, a Honda group or a Toyota group or a Ford group will have a number of dealerships with a number of brands on those lots, and they want to target those individuals who come to those auto dealerships or those lots. And then, of course, restaurants and bars, right? Food and dining organizations that rely on high volumes of traffic and want to retarget people who visit their locations. The second category of really good fits are organizations that run seasonal or special events. And this is not necessarily a recurring event. Let's say it's a rock concert, or let's say it's a circus has come to town, where the Ringling Circus has come to town, something large like that. Great candidates for location-based marketing, because of course they want to drive the same circus goer to the next time the circus comes to town, or they want to drive the music fan to the next concert that comes to town, et cetera. The travel and hospitality industry is a great fit, and then sporting events, which is really very similar, or sporting organizations, which is really similar to events and concerts. If you've got a football fan, or you have a San Francisco 49ers fan, you certainly want to know where they're going, and you want to target them where they go. And then the last category is organizations that want audiences that visit specific retail locations. And that sounds a little squishy, but let me explain what I mean. So let's imagine you're an e-commerce brand and you only do business online. You're selling, I don't know, shoes. Well, you're going to want to find shoppers that go to shoe stores in the real world to win them over to your online store. Makes sense, right? So if you're a Zappos, you're going to want to go target everybody who's been to DSW and who's been to Foot Locker and any other shoe store for that matter to bring them to your online operation. And then also CPG brands, large and small. We see shoppers, or rather we see, CPG brands targeting shoppers that visit stores where their products are carried so they can remarket to those cohorts. And with that, let me actually take a pause and shift to our first poll. Brent, if you want to take over here on the poll.
Absolutely. Let me just grab that up real quick. Actually, Christy, I don't have the polls in here.
So no worries. Well,
go ahead if you want to just run it. If you happen to have it, you know how you can just run that.
Sure thing. Do we now have the poll to run, or should we move ahead?
Yeah, it's because I don't have presenter mode. I apologize to everyone.
Oh, no worries. Okay, let me just go ahead and jump ahead then.
I just got it. Sorry.
Okay, great. Well, let's take a minute. Let me go ahead and read the question in case you guys haven't had a chance. So the question here is, how would you use location data in your marketing or advertising? And you can see there's a number of options here to choose from. You'd retarget people who visited your clients' locations or your own locations if you work for a brand. You would target people who visited competitors' locations, or build an audience based on other locations that people visit. You have sort of your own ideas, which is the fourth option. So please take a second if you haven't already and complete that poll.
And we'll give people, just about maybe a minute. I see that the poll, the votes are starting to come in. We're at about 40% have voted. So just give everybody a little bit of a chance, but I can already see a clear winner coming in.
Cool.
All right, just a couple more seconds. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close it and show the results now. Here you go. And B was the highest voted.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, that's great. Everybody has the same idea around geo-conquesting. So this is the use case where individuals would target people who visited your competitors' locations with the intention of winning them over. That's a very smart and often a very cost-effective use case to get net new sales. Thanks for that, Brent. Let me go ahead and jump ahead then to our next slide and talk a little bit about the tech behind location-based marketing. Now, I don't want to drone on about sort of the underneath the hood, if you will, and talk about the engine. But when it comes to location data, it's sensitive, right? People are curious. How did you know I was there? And how did I become a part of this audience? So let me talk for a minute just to inform everyone on how this works sort of on the back end. So the vast majority of location-based marketing is powered by opted-in GPS data. What do I mean by that? So you've got a mobile phone, I've got a mobile phone. We have opted in to share our location with a mobile app. It might be a mapping app, it might be a sports app, it might be a retail app, it could be really anything. It could even be an app that doesn't seem to have a use for location data. Maybe it's a calendaring app. But when you opt into that location service, you are effectively sharing your latitude and your longitude through that app. And that effectively is the GPS data that you've given your phone permission to capture and then reshare. So here's how the process looks. That GPS data, which you've opted into, is ingested, and then it's aggregated and anonymized. So no one individual can be identified in a particular audience. This ensures that the data is clean. It also ensures that the data is privacy compliant. The data then is next matched to places, and this is really, it sounds easy, but it's actually very hard, because if you think about it, your location data is nothing more than a coordinate on the map, right? It's a latitude and a longitude. But what exists in the physical world in that space? It could be a retail business, it could be a sports venue or a concert venue, it could be an auto dealership, it really could be, frankly, it could be anything, right? So matching the place to the coordinates is critical so that as a marketer, you know that a person has definitely been to Starbucks and not, let's say, the shop next door, whatever the shop next door, Chipotle, or whatever the case might be. So keeping that place database is up to date is really key. And we'll talk more about questions sort of you should have around your campaign later relative to places. Now, the next step, which is really optional, is enriching the data. And this might involve appending demographic or behavioral data insights to the location data itself. And this is done usually with a CDP or some other piece of the MarTech stack. And then we get to the three core elements of location-based marketing on the right side of your screen. Analytics at the top, audiences, and attribution. Now, starting at the top, the analytics piece enables you to understand your target audiences based on where they've been, or based on where they shop, I should say, not where they've been, specifically where they shop. How often they shop there, what other stores they visited, how far they traveled to get to that shop, all kinds of insights around location-based audiences. And then this lets you get smarter about how to allocate your potential ad spend. Now, once you understand these things, you want to be able to have a method for building location-based audiences to market to, right? And this is most easily done via a user interface that you can log into directly, enabling you to self-serve and get precisely the audiences you want. And we'll talk more about audience selection here later in the deck. You'll then want to be able to push those audiences to a demand-side platform. It might be, the Trade Desk, it might be Centro, it might be DataZoo, or it just might be a social platform. It might be a Facebook or a Twitter or a Snapchat, so that you can serve ads to your audience and, of course, drive activations or drive conversions, whatever the case might be. And then lastly, on the bottom of the slide here in the attribution box, you want to be able to understand how your ads performed relative to who showed up at the location you're marketing on behalf of your ad or as a result of your ad, right? So if you run an ad for a location-based audience for coffee, you want to see then everybody who's turned up at that coffee shop while the campaign is in flight, and then also, of course, after the campaign is wrapped up. So it's really important to understand those three pieces of location-based marketing, how the tech informs your ability to target people. So we can't talk about location data without talking about privacy, right? It's a critical issue, and it can't be ignored. So all the location data you use as part of your campaigns must be privacy compliant. Full stop, no ifs, ands, or buts, right? Now, the hallmarks of privacy, when you go looking for a location-based marketing solution, are generally these. The data provider honors all OS opt-outs. So what that means is if on your phone you say, do not share my location, simple, great, you're not sharing your location, you will not show up in any audience that can be marketed to as a result of that action, and that has to be honored. The second item here is de-identified aggregated data sets. So no PII can be pulled out of a location-based audience. PII, means personally identifiable information. So we wouldn't know your first name or your last name, or your email address, or your phone number, or your home address, or anything else related to your personal identity. All we know is a string of characters, a 16-digit code, visited Starbucks on this day. Let's remarket to that string of 16 digits, right? So it's really totally anonymous. And then thirdly on the list here, the data has to be CCPA compliant. And in the United States here, we have a law that just passed in California called the California Consumer Privacy Act. And the smartest vendors in the market are treating this as if it were national legislation. It's not, it's California legislation, but for the sake of being above board and privacy compliant, you want to work with a vendor who's adhering to CCPA. And then lastly, you want to understand what kind of privacy advocacy groups or working committees they're a part of. And of course, you can see here on the slide a couple of logos that are representative of those groups. So with that, let me actually jump into the case study portion of the webinar and talk you through a few real-world case studies using location data for geo-targeting, geo-conquesting, and the like. So this first story involves Moe's, which, if you're not familiar, is a quick-serve restaurant in the Tex-Mex category, so a competitor to Taco Bell or Chipotle, what have you. And Moe's wanted to geo-target and geo-conquest to reach existing Moe's diners and win over new diners. So what did that look like? They had a goal. They had a goal of driving downloads of their app, and a coupon resided inside of that app. They had a well-known appetizer that they wanted to sell. Chipotle was coming onto the market with their own appetizer that was very similar, and they wanted to retain their existing diner base, even with Chipotle entering the market. So that coupon was for that appetizer. They also wanted to increase foot traffic to their restaurants, naturally, And then they wanted to win over customers who were going to those competitive locations. Maybe they tried the Chipotle appetizer once, but said, hey, now that you've tried it, you know what the really, the better option is, come back to Moe's. How did they do this? Well, they delivered ads across social media, and specifically they used custom audiences on Facebook. So here's what they did to find their audience. What they did is they geofenced their own locations. And by the way, this is in Raleigh, North Carolina. So this was a local campaign based around a set of restaurants in this metropolitan area in Raleigh, a medium-sized city in the US. So they geofenced their own locations, and then they also found visitors who were going to Qdoba, which is a competitor, and to Chipotle, which is a competitor. And then they also found diners who were going to what they called indirect competitors. That was Mexican restaurants in the area. All told, they were looking at an audience of about 20,000 individuals. That was based on where those individuals had dined in the past. They pushed that audience into Facebook, and using the custom audiences feature in Facebook, they found 85% of that 20,000 had Facebook accounts. And so they were able to market to 17,000 existing and potential diners. So as a result of that campaign, what they saw was a 67% increase in download conversions using that audience, and an increase in customer loyalty at the stores they were already trying to market. So let me jump ahead to another case study around a very famous musician, Elvis Presley. Perhaps you've heard of him. I certainly hope so. Anyway, a great musician here in the States. Sony Music released an Elvis album posthumously. Elvis passed away many, many years ago. But Sony Music has a massive catalog of Elvis music, and they wanted to find Elvis fans to promote this new album. And so what did they do? Well, they wanted to drive awareness, sales, and streams of this new Elvis Presley album called Where No One Stands Alone. 14 original songs, $19. How can you pass this up, right? If you're an Elvis fan, that's great. Everyone wants to know about this. But how are you going to find Elvis fans? Like, that's not an easy thing to do necessarily. Well, what Sony Music did through their agency, actually, they worked with an agency on this, is they geofenced Graceland. Graceland is Elvis Presley's mansion in the United States. And they looked at a very long period of time to find all the visitors to Graceland over an extended period, because they figured, hey, if you visited Graceland, you must be a pretty massive Elvis fan. So we're going to use that audience, and we're going to target folks who visited basically the mecca of Elvis Presley fans. So after having done that, they found, looking back over an extended period, they were able to find about 13,000 visitors to Graceland. And again, they pushed that audience into Facebook using their custom audiences feature, and they matched 88% of that audience to address their potential audience. And here was the result. The ad reached 55% of that audience in the first week of running. Now, they did have a higher CPM cost due to the fact that it was a highly targeted audience. But interestingly, it was actually a 20% lower CPM than they got from their email list. So interesting to compare tactics there in terms of digital advertising versus email, two obviously major workhorses in the digital marketing mix. And they had 527 clicks from the media they bought and ran with a 1.7% click-through rate, much higher than average based on people's tendency to love Elvis and want the album. And the ad just anecdotally was shared 30 times, some additional data that we received. So you can see two very clever use cases around location data using geofencing and geo-targeting, and then in the case of Moe's, geo-conquesting. And with that, before we get to our next case study and our bonus section of the webinar, I want to jump ahead to one more poll, if you would, Brett.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and pop this up right now. And what we're going to ask is, what is your biggest business problem today? A, getting foot traffic insights. B, creating location-based audiences. C, using data to power media buying. D, understanding how paid media impacts foot traffic. Or E, something else. Again, just while we're waiting for everybody to vote, I'll read them again. What's your biggest business problem? Getting foot traffic insights, creating location-based audiences, using data to power media buying, understanding how paid media impacts foot traffic, or something else. And we are going to give just, ooh, that's a really even blend. I can see all the answers before anybody else, and I can see all the voting impacting. So I'm going to give just another second, and we're going to go ahead and close it out now. And I'll share the results. Pretty even mixed, but definitely creating location-based audiences seems to be the biggest one sticking out from all of these. But 19% was something else. It definitely makes me wonder. If you have a moment, jump into that question box and let us know kind of what some of your other biggest problems are.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Please do ask as many questions that occur to you during the webinar, and I promise I'll do my very best to answer as many of them as I can as we get to the end of the session. So great to see that there's an even distribution across the different business issues that you're experiencing at your organization, and great to see that I'm able to share some insight today that speaks to some of these problems. So let me go ahead and jump forward and talk about one last case study before we enter into the bonus section about hard questions you should ask yourself and any potential partners you work with around location-based marketing. So this last case study is around a venue, a theme park in this case, roller coasters, Ferris wheels, merry-go-rounds, what have you. And the goal of this campaign was to drive attendance during the 4th of July holiday here in the States. So a very specific time frame was being dealt with. And Plunge Digital, you can see their logo here on the slide. That is the agency that this theme park was working with. So again, very common for agencies to do this kind of campaigning on behalf of their clients. So what did Magic Springs Theme and Water Park want to do? This was this theme park that was looking to drive attendance during the 4th of July. They wanted to make sure they had as many people in the park during that holiday weekend as possible. And then importantly, they wanted to drive attendance to a July 6th fireworks show. I suppose it was on a Friday, and it just so happened that July 6th was the best day for fireworks. And they wanted people at the show because it was a dazzling thing to behold. And the agency had a goal themselves. They wanted to prove that this was going to work and earn repeat business from Magic Springs. So here's what they did. First, they identified their target audience based on proprietary data that Plunge Digital had. They have a social intelligence and analytics solution that looks at income levels, looks at other demographic criteria like ages, genders, that type of thing. And they drew they found some patterns and drew some conclusions around who their likely audience was. They then used that to target and pull a custom location-based audience, which I'll get to in a minute. And then they executed social and display ads to target that audience. So how did they find their location-based audience? So using what they knew from their social intelligence platform, they knew that theme park visitors were also gamblers. So they geo-fenced and geo-targeted a nearby casino resort called Oaklawn Racing Casino and Resort. This is in the state of Arkansas, by the way. They also knew that theme park visitors were likely to dine at Subway and Taco Bell. So they selected locations that were nearby the park for Subway and for Taco Bell, and they geo-targeted them. And with that combined set of locations, they found an audience of about 28,000 individuals. And what did they do? They served both social and display ads between June 22nd and July 6th. Remember, this was a time-based campaign to get people in the park over the holiday. And 200,000 impressions were served across each channel, both social and display, totaling 400,000 impressions. And so what happened? Out of that audience, 6.6% converted. So that means of the audience who were served the ads based on their location, 6.6% showed up at the park during the desired window of June 22nd to July 6th. And out of that audience, additionally, they got 575 people to show up for the fireworks show, which was obviously in addition to the folks who were already planning on coming to begin with. So a really interesting use case around time constraints and using location-based marketing to solve for a very specific window and sort of threading the needle, if you will. So let me spend just a minute before I go into the bonus section on sort of what options you have to choose from when it comes to location-based marketing. And there's really a continuum here to think about. So before I go into the bonus sort of content, I want to spend a minute on each of these three paths. So the one you should choose is, this is the punchline, the one you should choose should line up with your goals, of course, whether those are brand goals or business goals, client goals, campaign goals. Before you decide which one's appropriate, decide on what you're trying to accomplish first, right? So starting from the left, we all know and we all use the major platforms for advertising here on your screen. Now, the nice thing about Google Ads and Facebook is that they're free and everybody uses them. But when it comes to using them, man, getting support, managing campaigns, That's cumbersome stuff. I mean, entire agencies exist because these platforms exist, right? Oftentimes brands don't want to manage these platforms, so they simply outsource the function. Now, when it comes to customization, it's not possible here to get highly targeted audiences. You can't get the audiences that we were describing in our case studies. Now, you can geo-target a city or a state, but you just can't get down to a store or a chain store level with a Google Ads or a Facebook. So they really enable, in the end, they really enable more of a spray and pray approach to location-based marketing. So moving to the middle, you have your audience marketplaces, and these are sort of the easy button, right? They're platforms that enable you to get a geo-targeted audience based on general characteristics of an audience. So it might be coffee drinkers, or it might be golfers, or it might be moviegoers, right? These are sort of demographic consistencies among an audience, right? But you really can't get more specific than that. Not a lot of customization occurs with these audience marketplaces. And while they're very easy to get going with, you can sign on and pull audiences out, quickly. Your cost is going to be variable depending on what audiences you choose. And you're also generally going to be required to spend a minimum on media. So often to get to those audiences, you have to commit, maybe it's 10K, maybe it's 20,000, whatever the number is per month on media spend. So you're pretty locked in. If you have this option, you're pretty locked into using that platform, and your cost is going to be variable and harder to predict. Moving to the right, you have your location-based marketing software providers. Now, this is where you find a really nice intersection of easy to use and also a high level of customization. This option is going to allow you to geo-target down to the store level, like we were talking about a moment ago, and you can get a look-back period for whatever time you'd like. You can look back to 4 days in the past. You can look back 90 days. You can look back just at March 22nd, 2019, in the case of a concert, whatever the case might be. And you can also get creative here and find very specific audiences. For example, an auto dealership might want to geo-target their audience made up of people who visited their lots and their dealerships only in the last 7 days, knowing that car buyers who are ready to buy show up on the lot with check in hand or with money in hand, right? So there are very specific use cases for this kind of software that are just not able to be accommodated in these other platforms. And you're also going to have a nice predictable cost for this option, so you can budget easily, right? If you're an agency, we often see a lot of our agencies even passing this cost on to clients in the form of retainer fees or monthly fees, or in marking up media. So it's a nice way to sort of think about recouping the cost. So with that, let me transition into the bonus portion of today's webinar. And these are really questions that you can ask both yourself and ask your location-based marketing provider, partner, whatever you want to call them, what they do and how they do it, so that you're getting the best quality audiences at the best possible cost is really what this is about. So the first set of questions you want to ask yourself and your potential partner is around audiences, which seems like a no-brainer. But I want to break this down into both audiences and places. So we'll get to places next. So the first question to ask is, hey, are you verifying that audiences are opted in and privacy compliant? This is a deal breaker. If it's not happening, you are running afoul of IAB, NIA. You're going to want to make sure your marketing is very privacy safe, right? So ask that question. You're also going to want to make sure that the data, the location data that's being collected, is time-stamped, right? So if you want to build a location-based audience based on people who've been at a place at a certain time, that data has to be time-stamped. So the data feed you would get would obviously have that metadata appended. And then you also want to ask, what's the scale of your device data? How many people can I get into my audience ultimately? And this really comes down to what providers call daily average users and monthly average users. So this is the numbers. This is the number that serves as kind of a baseline for the number of individuals you'll be able to build into your audience in the aggregate, and that you can ultimately market to. And then there's also a question around events per device, and this is a question of depth. So if I walk around with my phone with location services on all the time, the events per device is going to be a reflection of all the places I visited. And then the greater the number of events, the greater the number of places my phone has been seen at. So I may have been at Starbucks, and if my phone had an event at Starbucks, then I will be included in that audience, essentially. So a little bit of inside baseball there, but something that's important to understand. And then lastly, you're going to want to understand how often audiences are up to date or are updated and how often they're refreshed, right? So for audience building and attribution purposes, audience data really should be refreshed about every 24 hours. So that's kind of a benchmark you should look for when it comes to updating. Now on the places side, there's a couple of really key questions to ask because this is just as important as the data itself. So the first question you're going to want to ask yourself is how comprehensive is your place information? Are you looking at a city? Are you looking at a set of airports? Are you looking at stores within an airport? These are all questions that are very salient to what your campaign or your brand goals might be. And this is important to distinguish, right? You also want to ask about place precision. So it's one thing to be able to market to people who've been inside of a Starbucks. That's very valuable. You know those people have crossed that geofence and they've gone into the store, and more than likely they've had something to drink, they've had a coffee at that store. It's a whole nother thing to market to people who've walked past the Starbucks. That's not so valuable. So you want to make sure that the place information is highly accurate and precise so that you know you're only getting people who actually entered the geofence and didn't just walk by it. You also want to make sure that you're verifying place information to compensate for bad addresses. So what this means is, you've got a location data that is constantly changing, right? You've got places that are constantly changing, and there has to be a mechanism where the place information is being scrubbed for locations that have gone out of business or who've expanded their footprint, that maybe they added a second half of the store or what have you. So you want to make sure you're getting a full picture of all the places that you're marketing for. And then you also want to know how you're able to filter out locations to suit your campaign's needs. For example, we talked about on Facebook, if you could geo-target, New York City, but really how valuable is that? What you really want to do is you want to geo-target all of the delicatessens in New York City, which is a totally different campaign and totally different level of value that you can derive from location-based marketing. So with that, I want to leave some extra time for questions. I know I went through a lot of information in a fairly abbreviated time, but I want to make sure that I get to everyone's questions. So with that, let me go ahead and transition it back to you, Brent.
Thanks a lot, Dan. That's really, really great information. I mean, honestly, this is a topic I think that can be quite difficult, and we have quite a few questions that have rolled in that are going to look to kind of determine some of the nuances between some of these different tactics and a lot of the different platforms and options. Do want to take just a brief moment to kind of let you know about our next webinar, which is going to be in 2 weeks at the same time on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to have Andreas, who's going to be here from Longtail UX, talking about Google hogging half of your traffic and how to get it back. I think this is also a topic that a lot of search marketers are dealing with, so that will be very interesting and highly suggest you kind of, registering for that and coming and checking it out. With that said, I do want to dive into some Q&A, and as we're talking, if you have additional questions, please continue to pop them in the question box. But let's kind of dive in, and there's a bit of questions from all over the place, so I'm just going to kind of walk through them as they came in. So what can you say about professional services with locations across the country? How do you, would it be something that you have to break it up into multiple individual campaigns, or is it something that you can kind of work with? And have you dealt with any customers that have a situation where they have professional services with locations all across the country?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something we get quite often here at Reveal Mobile. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, it sounds like this individual is interested in marketing on behalf of maybe chiropractors or accountants or law firms or organizations that obviously provide a service instead of a product. And I guess the short answer to that question is it depends, first and foremost, it depends on the type of professional service being provided. There are a number of sensitive places, and you can frankly Google location data sensitive places, and you will see that location data providers will not provide location data for people who visit health clinics, hospitals, outpatient, cancer clinics, certain types of religious organizations. So think about, obviously, the sensitivity around the data that you might be gathering, and you just frankly won't have access to that data, and that's not something that we would provide either, of course, following privacy laws. That said, it's perfectly reasonable to market the services of a professional roofing company or a professional a day spa, what have you. And I think when it comes to those kinds of audiences, there's two ways you can approach it. One is obviously to geofence and geotarget individuals who have gone to your locations and locations like yours to build the largest number of audience as possible. Oftentimes, you know, if it's a roofing company or if it's a day spa, there might be only one or two locations. So you'll need to add additional locations to get a meaningfully sized volume in terms of your audience. And then secondly, you want to make the offer very specific when it comes to those campaigns. So it might not just be an awareness campaign, but you want to actually drive people to a phone number, or you might want to drive people to take action on some sort of time-limited offer. So it is a trickier value proposition in terms of getting people to convert against professional services. But it's also something that if done sort of deliberately and carefully, it can be quite effective.
Awesome. Really quick one. You mentioned CPG. What does that mean in full?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to clutter the content with acronyms. CPG stands for consumer packaged goods. So think of things like things sold in grocery stores, right? Toothpaste, potato chips, you know, shampoo, that type of thing, where you would find them. It's a commodity product basically, and you would find them in large retail locations.
This is a very individualized question, but it might be good for other people who have similar type of businesses. But what location-based marketing tactic do you think would be best to target clients for a daycare?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. So a daycare is one of those, well, it's not a sensitive place. So it's not a cancer clinic. It's not a bail bondsman office. But it obviously is a place that works with children. And any minor is not a part of an audience. So you would not be able to geo-target kids, whether they carry a phone. Let's say they're 13 and their parents gave them a phone. You wouldn't be able to geo-target based on that device. But you want to geo-target, of course, maybe the parents who've dropped off their kids at those locations. So when it comes to, again, a very good question around a very specific use case, when it comes to geo-targeting daycares, what I would recommend is doing what the agency did around the theme park. Find those locations that your audience has an affinity for. Do the moms or dads who drop off their kids at daycare also shop at Target? Do they also go to, you know, does everyone in town go to this restaurant? You know, at Friday night, you can find everybody at you know, JR's down the street, or you can find everybody at this chain of restaurants on the weekend. So you want to find locations that have sort of something in common with your core audience, and you can geofence and geo-target those locations to build your audience, and then market to those individuals to push the daycare. Frankly, you want to naturally advertise the daycare as a wonderful business. So it's a great way to find your audience in terms of where else your moms and dads go. And location-based marketing is a great tool for that. So if you were to geofence the school itself, a good location-based marketing tool will tell you that all the moms and dads who drop off their kids at this school also go to Walmart or also go to Chick-fil-A or whatever the case might be. So you can draw a very clear inferences from the data to find out where else you should target.
Very interesting. What would you say about the Blue Owl patent for capturing and analyzing location data associated with mobile device of the user application status? It's active today, and they're curious how you feel this is going to change our tactics.
Now, can you say the name of is it Blue Owl?
Blue Owl patent, and it's a patent for capturing and analyzing location data associated with a mobile device.
That is a new one for me. I'm going to jot that down and research that myself. I don't have an answer for that.
And just for any questions that we don't get to or questions that we do need to look a little bit deeper, we will be sending all these questions over to Dan and asking him to take a little bit of time and answer some of them for the recap post. So definitely check back for that recap post early next week, and we'll make sure we get an answer in there after we get a chance to review it. Next question.
Thanks for raising that. I will definitely look into that. I appreciate the question.
And this may be another one of those, and this is a huge space. So it's, you know, I find it's, you know, some people, I've been in social since the very, very beginning, and things come out left and right that I had no idea about, you know, so it happens for sure. But do you think that there's going to be an issue with location-based targeting that's going to be affected by the ITP 2.3 browser third-party cookie limitations that are happening with Safari and Firefox?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that the bomb was dropped a few months ago around Chrome. Google's announcement that they're going to end support for the cookie. It's got everyone scrambling. Location data is not in that world. So actually, it's funny. You know, you could draw an analogy between cookies and location data, but one is online and the other one is effectively in the physical world, right? The cookie is the digital sort of footprint, if you will, and the location data is really the actual physical footprint. So not affected by that change at all. In fact, location data is a much more durable piece of data in the mix that should endure. And there is, let me add, there is data from the NRF, that's the National Retail Federation that represents retail organizations across the world, and certainly here in the US, that says that consumers value convenience more than they value, you know, the worry around sharing their location. So frankly, the vast majority of us have opted into location sharing services, and we get a valuable service for that. We're told the weather, there might be a safety or, you know, or sort of a personal safety app around that. We get served media that is useful to us because of where we're located. So all the research, even though there's sort of some hand-wringing around changes in the ad tech industry, all the research from the trade groups is showing that consumers value the convenience that location data brings.
Great answer. This one's a very interesting one. I have a storefront, but my competition doesn't. How can I use these concepts to win audience away from them?
Could you repeat the first part of the question, Brent? I missed it.
I have physical storefronts, but my competition doesn't have a storefront.
Well, that's a really interesting question. Let me give that a half a second of thought. So I would say the key is in the offer, right? The key is in the call to action and what you're actually providing to your location-based audiences. You need them to get off their couch and go into a physical store. So the thing that you are offering to them through your ad has to be of demonstrable and immediate value to them beyond the convenience of them not leaving their couch. And frankly, this is something that's pretty relevant to location-based marketing overall, because the offer always has to sort of beat whatever the competition is offering. You're always looking for an activation. So to get people into the physical store, most retail purchases happen inside of a brick and mortar store, so you have that to your advantage. But shoppers are looking for an experience. So maybe it's a matter of actually offering not just the discount or the special pricing, but it's also a matter of coming to the store and making that part of sort of their experience more so than just a transactional one-off.
One of the things that I thought about initially when it first came to mind was the idea that you don't have to wait for this item, right? If you could do movement tracking in any way, and you might be able to speak on this afterwards, if you're able to track people on a path or people who are coming into your radius, and you could say something to the effect of like, why wait 2 days to get this online? Stop in and get it now. You know, something of that nature, that might be a way to draw people in.
That's a great point. And I'll have you know that, you know, the Allbirds and the Warby Parkers and the Casper mattress people, all these guys who are direct to consumer online built a sustainable business model doing those things, but they are projected to be building brick and mortar physical locations to back up that brand, because frankly, they know that they get a greater share of wallet when they build physical locations and people can experience their products in store. And they also want the convenience of returns. So as a consumer, if I buy a Casper mattress online and I don't like it, I want to be able just to drive it to the store and offload it right away. And they also know through research that Casper and other organizations have done that when you're in store, you're often more likely to make a purchase you would not have otherwise made because you're physically there. So there's a direct correlation between having a physical location and increasing your share of wallet. So don't lose sight of the fact that the online business is stealing all of your consumers' dollar, because frankly, people are still shopping in stores, and when they're there, they're buying things they didn't expect to buy.
I think it was Amazon who said, you want to know the true definition of being nimble. We're a company that started to essentially eliminate brick and mortar stores, and we're now going to launch our own brick and mortar stores, right? So the full circle, right?
Right, totally. Yeah, within the Whole Foods thing is a great, obviously, case in point in that as well.
Absolutely. So kind of continuing on, something else, how do you direct people to two different location product levels when the two locations are less than 15 miles apart? This is an individual that's saying they have two physical locations that are within a 15-mile radius between each other, and that is not something that is allowed. It's not a small enough number to be allowed to target on something like Facebook.
Right, it's a great question, and this comes back to our distinction between the type of platform you're using. So, again, Facebook is super easy because it's super convenient because it's free, but it's not all that customizable. You can't get down to that level of store or chain using a Facebook or a Google ad. So the recommended path forward would frankly be to the far right of what I showed you, the location-based marketing software, where you can specifically target building footprints and build your audiences based on those footprints.
Do you want to throw that slide back up real quick while we're sitting here? And then I'll go ahead and grab the, there you go.
Yep.
So there's the slide that he's talking about, the fact that, there's limitations when you're dealing with, free softwares and softwares that are really meant to kind of, gather that 90% market share, the people who are just, really looking to throw up ads. You have to remember, a lot of times on Google ads and Facebook, a lot of the money spent is never really optimized in any way, shape, or form. It's not something that they need to really define. Whereas some of these other platforms that you see moving across to the right, even, Dan's company, Reveal Mobile, these companies, they're focusing on a more particular audience of marketers who are looking to have more specific results. And so you start to see that, through those. So it's just upgrading, as Dan mentioned.
Yep, precisely.
This is interesting. Individuals at an agency, and they're wondering if you might be able to give them some advice on how to classify location-based services to potential clients, and what would you, think would be a relevant approach for a pricing strategy?
Yeah, it's a question we get a lot. We work with a lot of agencies. So what we see generally is agencies tucking the cost of their location-based marketing, either software or overhead otherwise, into their monthly fee, which is very common, and actually passing that on to the client base. And there are simple ROI calculators for this. Or you can simply mark up your media spend and you can recoup the cost that way. So let's just play it out really quick in some simple numbers. If your monthly fee is $100 and you have 5 clients, you're making $500 of fixed income a month. With location-based marketing, if you were to increase your fee to $600 a month, now you're, with 5 customers, if you increase your fee to $200 a month with 5 customers, now you've got, $1,000 per month of fixed income. And you're effectively now even making the location-based marketing product profitable because you've increased your fees. And the other way, of course, is to mark up your media spend, as I mentioned, based on the campaigns you're running for those location-based brands that you're marketing on behalf of. You can simply, average media markup is about 20%, I believe. You can increase your markup some percentage to recoup some of that cost. And there's data on average markup across agencies in the US that's easily accessible if you want to look that up.
Absolutely. Another interesting question, and this I think is a concern that I think a lot of people have, and that's sometimes GPS bounces you around. Think about like you're on one of those feeder roads and it says you're on the highway, and so you can't quite get that, or vice versa, you're on the highway and it thinks you're on a feeder road, so it keeps trying to get you to make a U-turn or turn left or turn right. How does that factor into determining how companies will know or determining walking by a Starbucks versus entering a Starbucks?
It's a fantastic question, and there are actually a number of different ways to capture location data, and GPS is certainly not fail-safe. It's not perfect, but it is the most accurate of all the sources. Going down in accuracy, you've got things like IP address, you've got things like Wi-Fi, and then of course at the very sort of bottom of accuracy, you've got bid stream data or exchange data, which is just sort of guessing where a person is based on the ads that they're consuming. So GPS data, while not perfect, is as close as you can get. And your sort of best-in-class location-based marketing software providers will get to an accuracy level of 6 decimal places. So GPS coordinates obviously have a number of decimal places, and once you get down to that 6th decimal place on the right side of the decimal, you're looking at about a meter's worth of physical space. So yes, there's going to be probably some outliers of people who were maybe leaning up against Starbucks on the city street and didn't actually go in, but that's going to be such an edge case and such a small number of your audience that you're not going to be spending careless money if you were to geo-target on that particular Starbucks. So if you're looking for a more accurate type of location data, I'm not aware of any that exist, but I assume there are maybe some VR or some AI companies out there who are working on it today.
Beautiful. If I'm targeting a specific location, for example, WeWork, can I crawl some data to automatically create all locations and updates on all existing WeWork places?
Yes, yes. So location-based marketing software is going to allow you to build audiences based on single locations, groups of locations that are unified by a name or a brand, or national chains. If you want to look up all of the Bed Bath & Beyond stores in the US, and we actually did a study on this last quarter around Bed Bath & Beyond's announcement that they were closing 40 stores in the US. We used our own software to make predictions around which stores were closing based on volume and what stores were going to go capture that audience as a result of Bed Bath & Beyond's closing. So you can absolutely geo-target organizations by brand at the city level, the state level, national level, what have you. So it can get pretty granular, yes.
So the software itself might incorporate all of the other addresses. So if you're like, I want to target Taco Bell, it might be able to tell you all the Taco Bells in a certain city?
Yes, it can tell you all the Taco Bells in a city, in a state, in the country, or you can just target, Taco Bell at 123 Main Street if you wanted to.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's say I'm a total noob. I don't know anything about this stuff, and I want to send ads to people who have visited competitors, and they don't understand some of the nuances in the gold. What's the best option, just generally speaking, on how you accomplish that?
Yep. So the first thing you want to do is find out who's visiting your competitive locations, right? And the best way to do that is through location-based marketing software to the far right of your screen here. You can't do that on Facebook, you can't do that on Google Ads, and you can't do that through these audience marketplaces. But by virtue of having insight into, let's say, if you're a Chick-fil-A, having insight into everybody who went to Kentucky Fried Chicken and to Church's and to Popeyes and what have you, your location-based marketing software will tell you exactly the devices that showed up at those locations. You can pull those audiences out of that software in the form of a CSV file. That CSV file will have a bunch of just 16-digit strings of numbers and letters that correspond to a mobile device. You push those they're called mobile ad IDs or MAIDs for short. You push those MAIDs into an ad platform, a demand-side platform, as I mentioned, or a Facebook, and you will then be able to serve ads to those particular MAIDs or people who carry the devices with those MAIDs. They will see those ads.
Interesting question specifically about your tool. Can Reveal Mobile be used international locations, for instance, on brands or venues in Spain?
So yes, the short answer is yes. We have 3 products. The software product that I've described sort of in brief on this webinar is not usable in Europe. So that answer is no. But we have other products that are location data oriented that do work in other geographies, yes.
Beautiful. One of the biggest hurdles seems to be extracting the specialized audience to market to. You mentioned a couple services. Are there any methods that don't require a service to extract such a targeted audience?
I am not aware of any. I don't know of any other way to get a location-based audience other than the services that capture or sell location data.
And that would probably be due to privacy laws and stuff, right? I mean, there's only certain people that are allowed to truly partner with the different mobile. Is that what it is? I don't understand enough technologically, but I'm wondering, is there a reason why that is?
No, that's right. That's exactly right. It's a marketplace. Location data is something that is bought and sold in the same way that, TV viewership data is bought and sold,
Gotcha.
or Things you purchase at the grocery store are bought and sold to various organizations. So yeah, in the same way any other data industry works, location data works in a very similar fashion.
And it's also very personalized with, like you said, these MADs, you're essentially, you don't want just random statistical data, you want very specific individuals.
That's right. You want people who've showed up at specific locations at a specific time so that you can market to them with a very specific offer. That's exactly right. And as a result, you're going to get much higher conversion rates than you would with sort of the spray and pray.
If I am a golf resort, how much are we speaking to target, how much are we speaking to target other golf sorts? I know what they want to know. Let's say I'm a golf resort and I'm going to be targeting other golf resorts. What kind of money are we talking about? What am I spending?
Oh, gosh. So how long is a piece of string is the answer to that question. The short answer is as much as, well, I guess first, the first variable is audience size. So if you're a golf resort and you want to target golfers who play at other courses, let's say there's 5 of them, your audience is going to be 5 times that number of golfers. If you want to geo-target 20 courses, let's say you are in Southern California and there's a course every other mile and you can target 20 of them, your audience is going to be 20 times that number of golfers. So your media spend is going to be commensurate with the number of people you're targeting, obviously, based on media spend. But these location-based marketing software platforms will not charge you based on how large your audience is. They're going to allow you to access the audience, big or small, for the same cost. So you can get 100,000 people, you can get 1 million people. It's going to be a flat fee. And then ultimately, when you market to that audience, that's where the variable cost comes in. You can spend $10 on Facebook, or you can spend $10,000 on Facebook. So that's really a question of how long you want your ad to run, and what the rate is for accessing that audience based on those ad platforms, which I cannot speak to. It'll depend on your campaign variables.
So we're really kind of on that edge of time, but we have one more question I want to throw in there real quick, because just so we can have covered them all. How will the increase in mobile VPN usage impact the ability to accurately geo-target?
Mobile CPM usage. I'm
VPN,
not sure.
VPN.
Oh, VPN. Thank you. So VPNs are specific to IP addresses. So the location-based marketing software that I'm describing is not dependent at all on IP addresses or VPNs. So it'll have actually 0 impact on the kind of accuracy and the kind of reliability you're going to get from a real mobile, for example. So nothing to worry about. If you're working with location data that is harvested from an IP address, then that would definitely be a question to ask that vendor.
Beautiful. Dan, I really appreciate you taking the time. Everybody who joined the webinar, thank you for your time and for participating and for listening. And like I said, we will have a quick survey, and also this will all come out in a recap post early next week. So please check for the recap post, and go out there and find Dan, talk to his company, figure out what's going on with their business, and definitely take advantage of somebody who really knows a lot about this space. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate the time. Take care.
Cheers.